So I hope that cleared that. It's clear as mud now, right? Okay? If you have a particular calendar position, I hope you do not feel offended or mocked. I didn't mean to do that in any way. I'm just appealing to you to reconsider the position and approach of how you've been handling it. I'm not asking you to change your mind. I'm not asking you to change your calendar. I'm asking you to make a decision for unity's sake, and how are you going to handle that situation. So if you have any comments or questions about this teaching, this is what we call the Afterburn. If you're online, Craig is manning the online desk. If you're here locally, Zuriel's got a microphone, or at least he's going to go get it. He'll have a microphone. You can go ahead and raise your hands, and we'll go ahead and address the comments or questions. Now, bear in mind that this is going to be questions about this teaching. This is specifically more for the people online who may be new and may have a lot of questions about a lot of things. If you have lots of questions about a lot of things, you're always welcome to call, email, or contact us through Facebook, and we'll try to get to your questions. Please bear in mind that I do have, at the moment, 20,495 unanswered emails on my phone. I'm not making that up. I showed that on Tuesday night. Were you guys there? On Tuesday night, I put that in front of the camera so people could see I wasn't making that up. So if I don't get to you, I apologize. The best way to make sure that you get through so we can talk to you is to make a phone call or arrange for Skype or some other WhatsApp, or whatever kind of way we can talk, Facebook Messenger, because speaking with me will get you what you need a lot faster than asking me to type out responses and answer questions through emails. Okay? I'm not a big fan of writing and typing. As you can tell, I like to talk. So I know there's no shock there. All right? So we'll go forward from that.
I just so appreciate this teaching, Rabbi, and I can remember the days when I first started in Torah, and it was so romantic to get online and see who had gone up to what hill in Jerusalem and had spotted the crescent, But I'm thankful that Father got me down here and under your teaching before I got too confused, and it's been a blessing. My testimony is that Father has greatly blessed my walking under your authority and embracing and enjoying the Hillel calendar. The second thing that I'd like to say is that I really appreciate so much your emphasis on honoring Brother Judah, honoring his position that Father has given him as guardian of the Torah, and that not that we have to embrace all the traditions or impose things on other people that Yehuda does, but it's so enriching. It's so enriching for me personally and for those that I've talked with to be in sync with them. To be in sync, sometimes to just get up and even, pray the Shema or declare the Shema. If I hit 9 o'clock on the dot in the morning, I have this feeling like all my brother Judah and Messianics, whoever, in this whole Eastern time zone, we're all declaring this together. What the angels must think.
Amen. Amen.
It's just really exciting. So I applaud that. I would encourage anyone that's new to this to do what you can to investigate some of the depths that Brother Judah has to give us under the direction of Rabbi Steve, who can help you spit out the bones and eat the chicken.
Exactly. Look, I want to just point out a couple of things real quick that I didn't do in the teaching, but it'll be good for the afterburn. First and foremost, when you have any kind of doubt or confusion about anything, you should first seek your leadership. Okay, but I can tell you as a leader, if there's an area that I can't seem to get a grasp of, my first place I'm going to turn to is the Jewish community to see what they've already understood and grasped. I know I'm supposed to wear tzitzit, but I don't have any idea, according to Scripture, what that looks like. How many strands? How do you tie them? That's something I look to the Jewish community to share with me. And so there are things that their centuries and centuries and millennia of experience we can certainly benefit from. And not to mention the fact, not only that, but in Genesis it tells us that the lawgiver, a law teacher, would not depart from between their feet to help us to understand an authority that they have. Okay? So that's very important that we understand. But also, this Hillel II calendar, which is really interesting, is that all of these people out there that keep, well, not all of them, but a lot of people keep other calendars. It's so funny how when the blood moons came around, the blood moons fell on the Hillel II calendar. They didn't fall on anybody else's calendar. They were all excited about it, but I knew some of the guys who were excited about it were not Hillel II calendar people. But somehow they bought into the blood moons falling on feasts that only were falling on feasts. By the way, that's how they knew 3 years in advance and 2 years in advance, because they looked at the Hillel dates. And so wasn't it interesting that the people that were so big on calendars were buying into blood moons using a calendar that they were against? I thought that was pretty interesting.
I had two thoughts. One was a comment concerning the rabbis in Orthodox Judaism also note two more calendars outside of the ones you did mention, one for animals and one for trees. I don't remember the exact dates for those, but they are there. The other thing was that
there is also another calendar cycle for the cycles of the high priest.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, so I mean, there's multiple calendars there, but the ones that affect us are the one for. And again, notice the wording in Exodus 12. He said, "This is how you count months." Then Leviticus 25 says, "This is how you count years." And so that's very interesting that the wording is actually in there. And I never caught that till last night when I was putting this together and I was reviewing my notes, and I read Exodus 12 again, and I highlighted and read in my notes, this month is the beginning of months for you, so we're counting months. That's the purpose of the calendar. There's another calendar's purpose is to count years. And they're not the same, and that's interesting.
The second thing was very few people that want to get the feasts absolutely perfectly. They don't realize when you're doing the feasts absolutely perfectly, it's in Jerusalem, and the calendar, whatever calendar you're following, has been ratified by the Sanhedrin. And not only that, but at least for some of the feasts, there are strict consequences for those who don't keep it on those specific days. And that's why there's witnesses required for the sighting of the moon in a temple situation, is because you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses for a fact, and then you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses for the breaking of that fact. So that's just another point.
Amen. Okay, so that's something else I should have brought up in the teaching, but that's why we're glad to do these afterburns. You know, very important that we understand that when people argue about, and I should have said this during the teaching, I said it last time, people say to me, oh, well, I figured the calendar out, I got it right, and you got it wrong, they'll tell me. I said, okay, great. So when are you leaving for Jerusalem? Well, what do you mean? I said, well, you said you got it right. I said, yeah. I said, well, then you must be going to Jerusalem then, because to literally do this correctly, you would have to go to Jerusalem. It'd have to be a temple. Okay, there's another problem. So going to Jerusalem won't fix your problem because there's no temple. See, we have to be careful that we're not trying to strain out that gnat and we're missing the bigger picture, that there's more factors here than just figuring out the date. Okay? We're in dispersion, and I believe because he sent us here, we're supposed to keep these things here. So we don't have to go to Jerusalem at this point. But while we're here, we're under a certain amount of authority that has to go through what was put in place for dispersion. Because he says that when he does things, you shall go to the place where he chooses to place his name. He chose to place you here. You're not in dispersion by accident. We were dispersed. Okay? We didn't just decide to leave. He threw us out of the land. We were dispersed. And so that's his choosing. He chose to disperse us. Now, of course, it was our choosing to do the dumb things we did so that we would get dispersed. But then it was his desire that until he regathers us, that this is where we would be. And so there has to be those factors in there as well.
So you touched on today a little bit about the Ruach and how a lot of people are convinced, that the Ruach told them to do things a certain way, or that, they interpret something that the Bible says in that way. And you talk about that in other teachings too, sometimes. And so I guess I'm just wondering how exactly we're supposed to use the Ruach, because, you say a lot about testing those spirits, testing those things, always testing them. But how exactly can you test something when even if you're reading the word, you're interpreting it through, your lenses, or you're going to a teacher that has a certain view on that? So I guess I'm just wondering how you would find the right answers.
Okay, great question. Great question. So, what do you do there? You're sitting there reading the word, and we talk about testing the Spirit. One of the ways you do is you hold up whatever you feel the Spirit's leading you against the word. But what if it's the Spirit trying to give you, or you're feeling led that it's the Spirit leading you to understand the word a certain way? Well, then that first thing that you would do is you would go to your anointed, appointed person that you're interacting with. So that's why I emphasize over and over again how important it is that you have one, that you go and find one, that you can go and say, I was reading the word. I felt like the Spirit was revealing something to me. By the way, some of you do this. You'll call me and ask me those questions. And I just needed to have somebody to help me confirm, was I seeing this right, or was I listening to the right voice here? What's going on in this particular passage? Okay? This is why the body is so challenged, is that we don't have very clearly available anointed appointees that someone could just go to. Look, when Moses was around, they just went to Moses, so they went to one of the 70. There were people that were clearly there and identified to go to. Now it's not so clear. You're kind of on your own to try to find somebody that you hope you can trust that'll be the right person that's in line with what the Father's doing. That's the bigger challenge. But then when you have that person, then you can go to that person. And by the way, on top of doing that, look at the fruit. Okay, if what you feel the Spirit is showing you is not bearing good fruit, it's probably not the Spirit showing it to you. That's part of it. It's not exclusively the one and all, end all answer. Because you know what? The Spirit might have shown you Saturday, not Sunday, and your family's not ready to throw you out on your ear, and you can say that's bad fruit. So let's not use that as the only criteria. But you need to have guidance. This is the argument for teachers, that they're supposed to be teachers. You have to have that person you can go to and say, I just saw this in the Word here, and it's a little different than what I was thinking before. It's not what I'm hearing everybody else say, and I just need someone to help me understand, am I seeing this right? But you can't just go to anybody because they're in authority. You must go to the person that you have vetted out and feel confident actually is in authority. Just because a person has a position, quote unquote, where they have a title or they're in leadership of some sort, doesn't mean that they actually have authority. They're just in a position of authority. You need to go to someone that actually has anointed authority to be able to interpret, because that's Deuteronomy 17. Something happened, you don't know what to do with it, you're supposed to go seek authority to confirm.
I forget what teacher told me this, but there was one thing that they said that just as you were saying it popped back in my head. Sometimes he might be showing you this is the bad fruit. He might show you this is bad fruit because it's a way for you to know when you get in that situation, this is not good. You need to get away from it. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Now, again, like I said, but not always, because sometimes you're going to get what looks like bad fruit because people are going to get upset with you when you start doing the right things. So you got to be careful. Are you interpreting that as you're getting fruit of your actions, or is that really them being exposed to the fruit of their actions? Because what's being exposed is their inability to handle you walking in truth, which exposes them walking differently. So interpreting which fruit is being exposed is sometimes, again, a need for a teacher to help you through that. Hopefully that makes sense.
When seeing these arguments about the calendar, he comments that we shouldn't necessarily worry about trying to diffuse it or to convince anyone, but rather walk away from it and simply let it happen as it will.
If you're in a situation where either you or the person you're with is having a real challenge maintaining the 9 aspects of the fruit of the Spirit, it is best to find a way to bow out of the conversation so it doesn't escalate. Find a polite way to say, let's just agree to disagree and just move on. Because once you start losing those 9 aspects of the fruit, if you continue, it generally will escalate. Once you've lost your peace, your meekness, your gentleness, your kindness, etc., it tends to get less peaceful, more harsh, more rude, it just escalates. So we're all about trying to make sure as soon as we see something, make sure to de-escalate it before it gets out of hand. And the way to do that is to get out of it politely, respectfully, before it does get out of hand.
There's a couple comments, one from Charlie and Rosalind Wilson. She says that Charlie and I have been struggling with this topic for months, and we just came back to the seventh-day Sabbath, and we appreciate this teaching so much, and it's certainly a confirmation for us.
Amen. Amen.
No.
And we miss you guys. I know you guys are out isolated a little bit out there in the Northwest, and we miss you guys and hope you can come to another feast with us.
Yes, and Stephen Waffle has a comment almost regarding the same lines. Thank you, Rabbi. When we first came to you, we were not on the same calendar, but we wanted your leadership, so we changed for that. And I am so happy we made that choice. And he says, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And by the way, I know I didn't say this in the teaching, but Emunah requires that we accept that Abba has allowed this calendar situation. He wants us to take it seriously, but he's trying to see what we do with it. So it's not that he just allowed it so that we would have to figure it out. He wants to see us figure it out. It's not that kind of puzzle. It's a puzzle which has enough pieces to it that it's too easy, unfortunately, to come to more than one possible answer. So our trust has to be that he's allowed it for the reason, and this is why we're trying to figure out what to do next with it. What we really trust is that he's going to come and reset it. Here's my concern. My concern is that when Yeshua shows up and resets it, some people are going to argue with him because he's not going to pick their calendar. It could happen. Well, it will happen that some people are not going to get their choice. It could happen that people might actually argue with him because they're so emotionally invested in it.
If a new group wants to come under MTOI and the majority of its members use a different calendar than MTOI, would they be required to adopt a Hallel 2 calendar?
We try very hard not to impose anything on groups, and we just hope that they would come to, if they're going to be under MTOI, which is why it depends on, let me start again. MTOI is it's like a buffet of opportunities. In other words, when you go to a buffet, you don't eat everything. Well, some people don't anyway. I won't mention anybody, no. I know a few who could. You've never seen these guys eat. Okay. But the thing is, it's like a buffet, okay? There's a lot of things there that you can choose from, and you may choose some of them, you may not choose all of them. So really it depends on, Hugo, the level of interaction of being a part of MTOI. If MTOI has you as an official affiliate, that would be different than if you're just a congregation that we're working with, giving counsel here and there or helping with certain things here and there. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, we don't require a specific level of interaction. Your congregation, if you're watching online and you lead a small group or whatever, or a bigger group, it doesn't matter, you could choose the level of the services that we offer that you'd like to partake of. However, to be an affiliate that we post online and say, this is an affiliated MTOI congregation, I believe that congregation will have to get to the place where they're using Hallel 2. Otherwise, all we're doing then is confusing the body. Let's put it this way. As a conservative Jew, if I go to look for the conservative synagogue here in Chattanooga, or in New York City, or out in Idaho, or in Paris, or in Italy, or in Spain, or in South America, it doesn't matter. Every one of them is going to be keeping the same calendar, the same day. As a matter of fact, their services is going to be almost exactly the same, because that brings comfort and stability, etc. Okay? And so if I send somebody to our website to say, hey, I think we have an affiliate in Texas or in Wisconsin or in Canada or in South Africa or wherever you live that I want to refer you to, it's going to not work very well if you go there and you're expecting A and you start getting B. We should be on the same page if we're going to be claiming to be part of the same body, the same group. Does that make sense? So it's not so much a requirement. It has to do with what level of affiliation we're going to have. All right? what level of affiliation we're going to have. And by the way, it's going to have to do a lot more with not just calendars. There's going to be other things that we're going to need to be on the same page on, core belief-wise, so that we are being able to present to people, hey, if you go to an MTOI congregation, you can expect certain things to be the same there that they are everywhere else. Okay, as far as core beliefs and those kind of things. Is that fair? Does that make sense? All right. But again, you could be working with MTOI and not being officially posted on our website, et cetera, which, by the way, don't go look on our website. We have to totally redo that page. It's like only Beth Shalom in the Texas group, and that's it. We got a lot more that we need to put on there. But at some point, we'll be announcing when it's been revamped. But at that point, you should know that there are certain things absolutely we have in common. And so people will be then going with a certain level of expectation for unity's sake. So hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, from Mike, he has a question. What would you say to somebody that asks, if we follow Hillel concerning the calendar, how far should we go in following him? Should we follow him on what he believed about Yeshua?
This, again, the Sanhedrin did not make a declaration about all of Hillel's writings. The Sanhedrin made a declaration of, this is the way we're going to do the calendar. And this is what we have to be careful of. I'm not going to attack the person who said that. I don't even know who said that. I didn't even hear the name. But the thing is, this is what I would call potentially a knee-jerk reaction. By knee-jerk reaction, I mean, okay, well, if we're going to use Hillel's calendar, then what do we got to do? Everything Hillel said? Or we're going to do something that the Jews, we're going to give Jews authority. We're going to do everything the Jews said? Let's not do that. Okay, let's not go into these extreme conclusion jumpings. What I'm saying is, as the authority of this group, when there are things that are challenging, where there's no clear answer, I've said that it would be appropriate to then explore how Judah does things. I've also said that since this was imposed universally, the Hillel calendar, by the way, the Hillel second calendar is not the same Hillel you're talking about. The writings of Hillel, which deal with Talmudic stuff, which is Shammai, the house of Shammai versus the house of Hillel, it's a completely different Hillel. 400 years apart, give or take. Okay? So we're talking about completely different people even. So when you say what Hillel said about Yeshua, I don't know that Hillel II said anything about Yeshua. I don't see a whole lot of his writings anywhere. Hillel I is responsible for one of the two Talmuds to some degree. He headed the school that brought forth those Talmuds. And so we're dealing now with two different Hillels. So this is where, again, we have to be careful that we don't jump and run full-blown into a whole different place when we're dealing with something very specific. Hopefully that makes some sense. All right? It's a challenge, I know. But even when I mention Hillel, you got to realize it's not the same Hillel you're thinking of that you're comparing the two. It's two completely different Hillels. Okay, several hundred years apart. All right? It's just like the person who says to me, well, I read the Talmud, and I think it's blah, blah, blah. I said, no, you didn't. Yes, I did. No, you didn't. We go back and forth because I know they didn't. So I'll test them. I say, okay, well, which Talmud did you read? Well, what do you mean? Well, which one? The Talmud. I said, yeah, I know the Talmud, but which one? They don't even know there's two. I said, did you read the Babylonian or the Jerusalem? Are you upset with what Shammai was teaching or what Hillel was teaching? Did you read the Gemara or the Mishnah? What were you reading? I don't know. Now they're completely freaked out because they never read it. They read somebody put a piece or a copy of a piece online, and so they actually said, well, it's a picture of a page, so I can claim I read the Talmud. From one picture of a page? Was it in English? Then you definitely didn't read the Talmud. Okay? If you were really reading the Talmud, you'd have to know Hebrew. It was in Hebrew. You'd have to know how to read the middle of the page versus the outside of the page and all the other things that are on a piece of Talmud. You have to know where the Midrash falls into it, where the Gemara fills into it, where the Targums fall into it. It's not that simple. See, so let's be careful that we're not just jumping all over into from one riverbank into the other riverbank, and we're missing the river.
Okay, I think there's just about one more here from Thomas. His question is regarding why the trumpet sounding on the Day of Atonement would start the 50th year. His question is from Leviticus 25, 9 through 10, reading, and he says, reading these verses, how they are written, they say to blow the trumpet on the Day of Atonement throughout their land. Then a statement is made to hallow the 50th year. And then how is the Day of Atonement starting the count of the 50th year or hallowing the 50th year based on what it says here in these verses?
Okay. All right, so it says, you shall then sound a ram's horn to pass through on the 10th day of the 7th month on the Day of Atonement. Cause a ram's horn to pass through all your land, and you shall set the 50th year apart and proclaim release throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It is a Jubilee. If you understand the meaning of the Day of Atonement, okay, the Day of Atonement was a national repentance day. It was a day of release. It had to do with forgiveness of sin, forgiveness of debt, etc., as a nation. So this is a national observance, and the rituals that went along with the Day of Atonement had to do with that. So what more appropriate day than right after the Day of Atonement or on the Day of Atonement to now declare the release for the Jubilee and the release for the Shemitah. So it's absolutely connected if you understand what the Day of Atonement was doing. It'll take you back to the Azazel and the different goats and the casting of the sins and all of these things that were going on with the Day of Atonement. And so if you understand Day of Atonement, you understand that in the context of release of debt, because after all, when we sin, we owe him a debt. And so forgiveness of sin is a release of debt. And so that's the connection then to the Shemitah and the Yovel. Does that make sense? And so it's the most appropriate time to say, not only are we releasing debt by all the rituals of national repentance, because it wasn't individual repentance going on in Yom Kippur, it was national. Okay? The high priest was doing things on behalf of the nation. Then what more appropriate time is then to say, this is also the release nationally of all of the other debts that are connected to Shemitah and Jubilee. People returning to their own land, returning of slavery, slaves being returned, property being returned, debts being forgiven, financial debts, etc. All of these things were connected. So hopefully that answers the question. What I can say is there's not a single verse connecting these things to Aviv or to Nisan 1 or Aviv 1. It's all connected to Tishrei 10, the 7th month, 10th day. Now, Rosh Hashanah is the first of that month, so they call that the head of years. It's in that month that we just declared years. One of the realities, of studying this all out, I don't mean just the calendar, I mean everything that the Bible teaches us, is that there are going to be things, many things, that are going to swim upstream against what you've always thought, always understood, and were comfortable with, and that's going to be hard to push through. Because if you've always thought of something a certain way, it's very hard to think differently. Learning new things, no problem, simple. Unlearning something, very challenging. We are not good at changing our minds. Okay, so we live in a world with one calendar. January 1st starts the calendar. That's what we've been using for all these years, and that's our calendar. So now wrapping our brain around a two-calendar system doesn't seem to make very much sense. So our natural inclination is to go that somehow after Atonement, we're declaring, by the way, next Aviv 1 starts the Jubilee 6 months from now. That doesn't make any sense. Well, it's not 6 months, so I guess the 7th month, but you're going to go all the way through the 7th month. Okay? So you're going to have 5-6 months from now, you're going to have to remember we declared this. No. There's lots of verses that say, don't make decisions because you're going to have to let them go because next year's the release or 2 years from now, whatever it is, we're getting close. People knew when these things were coming. They were already preparing for it. They didn't need a 7th month, a 5-month warning ahead of time. They had years of warning. They knew when these things were coming. 49 years of warning for the Jubilee. And so I believe that let's go back to the idea of Hebraic study. Peshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. The 4 levels of interpretation that our brothers in the Jewish community believe Scripture should be interpreted through. The Peshat being the most basic, simple, straightforward conclusion in looking at something when you read it. The most logical conclusion is that this was happening right then on the Day of Atonement, because that's what it says. It's our trying to piece puzzles together to fit our own model in our own head about things that wants to push it to Aviv 1. That they're just making an announcement back here in Atonement. It doesn't say that. There's not a single verse ever that goes and says, and then when we get to Aviv 1, you start the Shemitah. There's just no verse for that. Or you start the Jubilee. And then what we do is we look at our brothers in the Jewish community, and what do we see? We see that when we get to Tishrei 1, they're going to announce 5778. That's what they're going to announce, the new year. They've been doing that for 77 years. That's a long time to be doing it a certain way. And so maybe they know something.
This is about leadership. Abba established an order. Without that order, we have chaos. It doesn't matter whether it's a parent or a rabbi or where the leadership is sitting. The leadership has a responsibility to make decisions. If the leadership makes a mistake, they're responsible to their leadership. That's not our problem. We can rest, finally. And unless we decide to judge our leadership, we can rest. And I think it's important that the body learn to forgive for all the abuse we've taken wherever we were, and rest.
Amen. Amen. You have one piece of this. Your piece is to find that and be comfortable with the leader that you come under. But once you do that, you can rest. You should be able to have a peace and an ease knowing that you've chosen the best you could and that the burden now is on the other person. That responsibility is now on that leader, and you can now let that go. That's not abdicating all of your responsibility. You had a huge one picking the leader in the first place. Choosing to come under that authority was a huge decision. At least it should have been, and you should not have taken it lightly. But once you do, you should feel that ease, knowing that I don't have to struggle with these things anymore. That person has that responsibility, not me. I did my part. I found him. Now it's his problem. I struggle with this with husbands and wives when I counsel husbands and wives. Sometimes I say to the wife, especially when they're having challenges, and the same thing to the husband, it can go the other way. The husband, I could say, look, if you would come under leadership, you would get where you need to be and allow somebody to help you. But also to the wife, get behind him and let him make the mistakes, but encourage him, because if you would do that, you could relax too. It's not your problem, but he's going to mess it up. Well, then it's his problem. He'll have to fix it. But what if he messes it up? Then he'll have to fix it. What if he messes up? He'll let him, that's his problem. You already chose him. Since you chose him, encourage him, support him, get behind him, be the support. Do the same thing with your other leaders. If you chose me, if you chose whoever is that leader, get behind them, encourage them, support them, but know that the problem, if there is one, is their responsibility to fix. That's why nobody should want the job.
Did the Hillel 2 calendar say that, for example, 1967 was a Jubilee year?
No, it did not. The Hillel calendar does not declare Shemitahs or Jubilees. Okay? It just tells you how to declare the months. It's a month calendar. Remember we talked about there's a month calendar and a year calendar? Hillel 2 is a month calendar. The nation was supposed to keep track of Shemitahs and Jubilees. All right? And so, no, unfortunately, it does not. It just has it's the first calendar of the two. It's the month calendar. I don't believe that anybody knows correctly which year we're in terms of Shemitas and Jubilees. There are those that believe they do, and they've done their research, and they make their cases, and who knows, they could be right. I just think that, again, it's one of those things where there's lots of different opinions. Okay, lots and lots. And by the way, you know, our good friend Mr. Khan put out all of this stuff about Shemitas and Jubilees, and the last time that we hit one, nothing happened. And he was all big hyping and everything else, and nothing happened. Market didn't crash. Other things that he said would happen, nothing happened. And we just passed one. So what do you do with that? You realize we don't know everything. We're not as smart as we think we are.